Good morning, and today we're going to talk about the uncanny. Part of your online learning activity for today is to research and go into theory and artists that have worked with and around this theory. You'll have a chat with Maddy after this talk where she's going to help you just kind of pull out some of the ideas that I want you to look at. And also too, in this talk, there's a lot of additional information on each slide with links and little sort of narratives that go along with the images. So if I don't cover something in the talk that I'm trying to make very quick, you can go back, read that, and pull that information in a link in the sort of notes section of the slide. Why am I doing a theory day? It sounds a bit boring, but actually theory is so important when we're creating art. It's the why we make something. It helps you create better artist statements, it helps you expand your practice, and every good artist should take theories, bits of literature, things that they've seen on TV, maybe a lyric from a song, or elements from other artists to help evolve and construct the work that they're making. So today we're going to focus on the theme of the uncanny and artists that have worked within the theme of the uncanny. And you can take this and build upon your summer project with this theme as kind of the lens you're looking at it through. So the uncanny effect often arises when the boundary between fantasy and reality is blurred. We are faced with the reality of something that we have until now considered imaginary. Like a lockdown where everybody has to start learning from home in a matter of a week. That sort of thing is that sort of sense of the uncanny. That's why I'd like to explore this with you as part of your carousel this year. The first image I'd like to show you is from David Uchukwu, and he described this image as a woman that has gone through something and emerged on the other side stronger for it. It's a beautiful digital image of this girl coming from this evocative misty forest with this ash smoke hair. What's really interesting about him as well is that he was 18 year age when he made this image, and he's exhibited all over the place. So he's a young digital photographer working with these sort of themes of the uncanny. What's uncanny about it? Her hair's not right? When you look at the image for a second, there's something normal about it, but when you look deeper into the image, something arises. So let's go deeper in kind of learning how to describe the uncanny and how it applies to the different medias of art. So the overview, what is it? We're going to look at sort of Freud and his explanation. Then we're going to look at it in photography, in horror films and games, and then we're going to talk about the uncanny valley a little bit as well. So what is the uncanny? The uncanny, or unheimlich, was a term first used by the psychiatrist Ernst Jens in his essay The Psychology of the Uncanny in 1906. Jens describes the uncanny as something new and unknown that can often be seen as negative at first. A lot of horror revolves around this idea of the other, this unnormal thing, there's something new that's threatening because it's new and it's not known. And the uncanny is the thing that explains a lot of reason why a lot of horror movies work. Sigmund Freud took Ernst Jens' sort of foundation of the idea and expanded on it in his essay, The Uncanny in 1919. He said it wasn't just about something being new, he said it's something about being familiar and alien at the same time. It's the opposition to homely. It's like if you've ever been away from home for a very long time, like if you haven't been home, and you've come back, and you're home, but it doesn't feel like home. It's that it should feel normal, but it's not quite there. And also too, there's like a secretive side to the uncanny, something that just doesn't fit. So it's like if you were to go out to a bar and you're having a pint, and all of a sudden you see your maths teacher sitting across from you. Normal outside of the context to which I know that person from. So that's also that sort of the sense of the uncanny, that the context in which you know somebody, you're seeing them in a different context. Freud argued that the unheimlich, therefore, is not just the known, but also he argued bringing something that was hidden or repressed, something that somebody tried not to let the world see, a class of frightening which leads back to what is known as the old and long familiar. Uncanny is the feeling which more powerfully explained in art than in life. Think about how it's been used in horror genre. Think about the sense of unease you get when looking at a playground with a padlock on it, things like that. something that is normally mundane but now seems sinister. Another really interesting way of looking at the uncanny is your childhood fears. Like when you're a kid, you want to keep the light on because there's a monster under your bed, or there's a goblin in your closet, so you gotta make sure that closet door is shut. It's the fact that as an adult, maybe the things you were scared of as a child and as childhood fears might actually be, grounded in actual truth. It's the clown that ends up being the it clown. It's the really creepy baby dolls. The ones that are like porcelain that you sometimes see at like charity shops. Those ones. It's that it should be an innocent thing, but there's something just sinister about the way it looks because it's old, it's worn, it's not in the context of a girl's room. It's that sort of thing. A lot of artists explored the uncanny, and particularly the class of artists who call themselves surrealists spent a lot of time working with analyzing dreams and interpreting dreams, and in that fantasy element of dreams, which is a lot of the sort of things they explored within the surrealist movement. The uncanny in a lot of sense relates to the concept of return, be it a memory. It's about exploration of that dream or nightmare. That's what people like Salvador Dali and Philippa Halsman latched onto. For example, in Voluptas Mors, the image that you see here, at first look, you might see a skull, or you might see a series of nudes, but then you realize that there's a second image there, that the nudes form the skull, or the skull is made up of nudes, whatever you saw first. It's the idea that these women in their prime are representing death, that the beauty of the female form is contorted and bent and creates something that is frightening. You've got in the foreground the gentleman, Salvador Dali, there. He's looking at you, the viewer. He's breaking the fourth wall before breaking the fourth wall was a thing. He's looking at you going, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And it's addressing the fact that the viewer is being engaged with one of the participants in the image, and the image itself is disturbing. So there's multiple layers to these images. They're images that you might need to look at twice to get. It's a movie you might have to see a second time to maybe catch all of the little bits. So I've got here 3 images from a surrealist photographer, Dora Maar. She had an exhibition at the Tate Modern last year, if you had a chance to see her. She combined photography and montage to create new context with her images. Cut things out and rotated them around at a time a lot of people weren't doing this. This is the turn of the century, but a lot of it's used for conventional portraiture. And here she is cutting bits of people's arms out. She's creating collages. She's overlaying images together to create her work. You've got people like Philippa Halsman, in a sense, was a portrait photographer, but in his portraits, all of the people are posed doing things that are slightly unnatural. Maybe you've seen a picture of Salvador Dali before and his mustache, or Alfred Hitchcock there with a bird landing on his cigar. You've got people jumping in all of his images, so he's taking a fanciful element into the context of portraiture. People like Man Ray, who said, I would rather photograph an idea rather than an object, a dream rather than an idea. Here you have him with one of his most famous images, where it's kind of a controversial image. It's one of the first images that starts to dehumanize a female nude and give her that sort of distorted, cropped body, objectification of the female form. This is seen all the time now, and it's become normalized. But at the time, it wasn't a thing yet, and then it became really a thing, and now we're going back and addressing it, going, is it okay to really just only show, like, cropped off ligaments of women to sell products? This was before all that happened, and this is that idea that the woman is the instrument, the muse. He also played around with what he called rayograms, or photograms, which is a technique where you place objects on photographic paper, which you would have or will be exploring with Katie in the darkroom, and you'll do a little bit of that with cyanotypes with me as well on your studio day. We've got Lee Miller, who is a wartime photographer, ex-model. She was a model for Man Ray. She then had the chance to enlist as a wartime photographer, and the middle shot there She was enlisted and embedded with the American troops and had the opportunity to be in Hitler's apartment. And that's her in Hitler's bathtub with her boots off. There's a picture of Adolf Hitler in the background, this weird bust. So the uncanniness of this image is just the surrealness of the fact that here's this woman chilling out the day he commits suicide. Think about that image for a second and think, wow, the context of that image completely changes the image. So she took pictures of the absurdity and the tragedies of war. You might have recognized her pictures as well. She was the photographer that went in and took pictures of the atrocities at Buchenwald concentration camp in Germany as well. She made the world know what sort of atrocities the Nazis were doing. So she's a really interesting photographer, especially if you're interested in sort of war photography, street photography, and photojournalism. If you look at the uncanny in photography, you've got people that create completely surreal scenes that are completely constructed using sets, like Sonia Brass here. There is a photographic theorist, Willem Fusser, who in his Towards a Philosophy of Photography in 1983 wrote that photographic images as significant surfaces, there's a magical nature in the image. So the idea that a photo on paper has a different context. There's something surreal about that frozen moment that's being presented in a certain context that gives it a sense of magic. That a straightforward image takes on an ambiguous, uncanny quality, as he sort of says, that sort of intellectual uncertainty of what's real and what isn't. Another sort of contemporary artist to look at is Lee Materazzi, taking pictures of her home and the new context. So this is something that you could explore or may have explored on your self-directed project day. Simple sort of thing of like the way she presents herself in the context of her bathroom, or the fact that she's flipped the second image over. Like, this image is uncanny because the first time you look at it, it looks like she's flown up to the ceiling, whereas instead all she's done is she's flipped the image around. So it's an image that at first looks so familiar, you think you know exactly what you're looking at, and you're like, oh wait, no, there's something wrong with that. Taking people out of context with their clothes, how does that change that situation? Isabel Wenzel, same thing. She kind of likes to contort her body and take the idea of the office worker, the cheap fabrics and that sort of stuff of like the 90s secretary is the best way to describe it, and using sort of flash photography to get these really grotesque highlights, and just the use of paper and just things like binders and things that become oppressive objects in themselves. David Uchokawu, who I mentioned at the beginning, you've got a self-portrait on the right-hand side, and these images about sort of water and nature and man. Self-portrait with the tears flowing out of his eyes, these sort of people in the mist. John Steziker, the context of what happens when you just simply collage two images together, combining the two faces and how that changes the context and the meaning of that original image. Brooke Didonato, her work taking typical suburban country imagery and just the way the form is presented in that, how that changes that image. So the uncanny in fantasy. Fantasizing the individual is present on the spot, but the phantom self changes into different concrete images of the narrative. Transformation of a thought into an experience. The way to explain that is, have you ever read a book or seen a movie or a comic strip or a song, and you put yourself into the context of that, and you imagine it being a real thing, like, oh, I could have a conversation with that character, or if I was that character, this is what I'd be doing. Freud's notion of art is fantasy. That initially Freud was convinced that writers or artists' own investment in the fantasy, but later became interested in the effect of the artistic text or the audience or the reader. So the idea of people that would go and be so inspired by artwork to do things like cosplay, I think Freud would be really interested in, people wanting to be that character. He was interested in how the reader might visualize themselves inside the work, whether it was a film or an animation or a computer game. He kind of predicted fanfic in that sense, and it's one of these things that you can explore too, is, maybe something that's a genre that means a lot to you, and you might want to find a way of, like, maybe presenting yourself as that character, putting the character into the context, or the absurdity of, a character in a mundane world, like if you're in full cosplay and then shopping at Tesco's. Alexis Pesquine, he is a photographer slash digital artist, and he looked at a lot of sort of the uncanny of people who have been disposed from their original context, their homeland, the migrants, and particularly migrants from inside of Paris who have overcome, hardships and loss and political strife and civil unrest in their homelands to resettle in Paris. And you'll notice that the crowns are made out of these Eiffel Towers because a lot of times these African refugees will work and sell this sort of tourist chink outside of the monuments in Paris. And a lot of times it is these cheap Eiffel Towers and stuff made in China that they're selling, to just feed themselves. The clothing he's wearing is made out of the bags that the sort of the cheap tourist stuff kind of gets packed into. And he's created this sort of boat and this whole sort of story based around the voyage of the Medusa. Which is, like, if you're interested in this image, it's something worth exploring. It's a longer talk. Let's talk about films. Hitchcock was really interested in Freudian psychoanalysis, and he worked a lot into his films, in particular Psycho. There's a fantastic video essay on it. He was interested in something that's seemingly normal that becomes perverse. The guy who runs the motel, who secretly spies on the hotel guest, Norman Bates. Everybody knows the scene, the shower scene, the blades up, that scene. That scene is personification of sort of the twisted nature of Psycho. Somebody thinks that they're safe and happy in a shower, in a hotel room with a locked door, and all of a sudden that space is no longer safe. And you've got this creepy guy slipping into the shower. But when he's in the shower scene, he's dressed as his dead mother. So there's a lot of contemporary films that deal with the theme of the uncanny. We've got films that came out this year like The Lighthouse and Parasite. You've got films like Get Out, which kind of look at these sort of normal situations that get subverted and twisted. It tells a story in different ways, but there's always a point in the thing where something's just not quite right. In Get Out, something not quite right about the parents when he first meets them. Things don't quite fit in, but then it slowly builds. If we look at contemporary horror films, they're all really interesting because they're playing with the idea of the other. The other in horror has always been a way of dealing with fears of racism, class injustice, immigration, xenophobia, homophobia. They've all taken on personifications of the monsters, especially in early horror films. You get a lot of films in the 1960s and 50s that deal with the fears of communism and the idea of the socialist collective, the zombie horde, things like that. There's always different points in time. But with films like Get Out, that's the first horror film where that card's been flipped. It's the white people that are the other in that. Parasite, at first you think the poor people who are trying to con the rich family are the parasite, but Bong Joon-ho flips that norm, and it actually turns out to be the reason that the poor people are oppressed is because the rich upper class needs them to be oppressed so that they can take advantage of them to live their lifestyle, and they're completely oblivious to it. So that's the interesting thing about uncanny in films, is the sort of other and how the other interacts with society as a whole, and how horror films is always a great way of looking at the current film's fears of society. Louis Buñuel worked with Salvador Dali, and he made these sort of surrealist films. Un Chien d'Andalou was the first film to ever be properly banned. It's really interesting what he did with sort of looking at psychoanalysis and dreams and kind of the horrible nightmare he created through that. You've got people like Robert Wine and the cabinet of Dr. Caligari and the sort of social pressure about this guy that comes in with his little medicine cabinet, and he's kind of a snake oil salesman, and he's got this boy that he keeps in a box, and he gets out and he abducts a woman, and it's all done with these beautiful, sharp German expressionist angles, and really through set design and filming, he's created his own genre. If we look at animation, we've got Jan Schwenkmeyer and his surrealist animations, borderlining on sort of dream and horror, using materials like clay and baby dolls, cutout paper to kind of create these sort of surrealist landscapes. Then we've got the Uncanny in games. There's quite a few surrealist and horror games. We love to be scared while playing video games. Games are interesting because they give you such a sense of control. You know you can always circumvent the danger, or at worst, just turn off the game if it gets too scary. There's games like Little Misfortune, Limbo, Summer Rose 3, which all play sort of on that sort of uncanny narrative, that dream space. And then the last sort of thing to explore is the Uncanny Valley. You might have heard this term. It really came out with the Polar Express, which you might or might not remember. It's terrifying because look at the kid. There in that image. He's got these glass eyes. Masahiro Mori came out with this idea in the 70s when like a robot stops being cute and starts being creepy. That's when it's in the Uncanny Valley. There's a dip, so the cuteness factor of a robot goes quite up, to a certain point where it looks too human and it sinks back down, and then there's a point where it starts to be okay again, where it's like, okay, it's human enough. But there's a point where it's not quite human and not quite android, and that's the Uncanny Valley. That's the Polar Express film. It's in games like Commander Shepard from Mass Effect 3. There's plenty of examples of bad CGI. Beowulf has the world's creepiest Angelina Jolie. Tintin. Any film where the characters don't feel quite lifelike, but they're there. And there's something unsettling. They're not supposed to be unsettling, but they are. It happens quite a lot in computer games when the characters look a bit too shiny, a bit too glossy, a bit too plastic, but something's not quite right. Anyways, that's my talk. I hope I have given you guys some ideas to ponder about the Uncanny, some maybe artists that you would like to explore, and hopefully help inspire you guys to maybe think and look into this theme a little bit more. Watch a few movies, check out the playlist I've made for you guys, look at some of the links and resources here in this PowerPoint, just to get a sense of how you can continue to explore this theme and how I'd like you to research. Once again, if you have any questions, Maddie's going to be in the session at 10:30 for you guys. Thank you very much for listening. Take it easy. Bye.